Welcome to DigitalK.
I want you to give her a big round of applause, Maja Vujinovic.
Thank you.
Maja, you have an incredible story to share, but let's start with the beginning. You were a child refugee?
First of all, I'm really happy to be here. A friend who's actually also as well responsible for this, Nicola, who's earlier on the stage. We've known each other through this network for a number of years now, since I've been in space. But to answer your question, I started off in 2007 or 2006, leading a group of hackers in Africa doing mobile payments. So mobile payments very early on, messaging platforms in emerging markets, and then moved into more traditional industries of private equity.
And also in healthcare, right?
In healthcare, energy, and
right.
ICT in Africa and Latin America, which then, as you said correctly, led me to live across the world in 14 different places around the world.
Right.
But what has come up lately quite a lot with some of the hacker community and quite a large amount of cryptographic experts is my background as a refugee, because my identity was taken away when I was 13 years old. And I had no idea then years later I would encounter a concept of a blockchain or homomorphic encryptions with now
Right.
identity and privacy being one of my passions.
You would say that, it actually triggered you to come into this whole decentralization era, right?
That's right. So I think through Africa, living in places where it's hard to transfer money or peer-to-peer, or where you have to pay so many bank fees and FX trades in order to pay salaries. When I got the paper, first of all, I didn't understand. First time I read the paper, I had to call one of my devs and I said, what is this? I think I understand, but I really don't understand. And it was natural, being in places like that, to really understand the power of decentralization. And then given my geopolitical background, it made sense, and I jumped right in it.
I want to dive into your geopolitical background in a second, but just back to this story. There are 7.5 billion people on planet Earth. Out of 1 billion of them are actually immigrants. Do you think actually that this whole movement around decentralization will actually give them the opportunity to create reputation and identity in a more fair way? Because we still have state nations, we still have governments. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm actually not that optimistic on this. And every time I hear, I gave this really large audience, I gave a speech around digital identity, and it was around World Bank constructing a blockchain project for identity and UN and all these large organizations. I actually think that just as much blockchain can be used for good, that people think it can be used for good, and given Andreas pointed out correctly, it's not a solution to many things actually that people claim it is. I actually think blockchain can be used in those cases to really control.
Right.
And I think Jamie earlier brought up the point of this whole surveillance capitalism and how these platforms have been used as an extension of the government. I do think that in the future you will have some of these protocols be used in order to control people's identities, right?
That's an excellent point, but one of the things that is actually also currently happening right now, there's been a lot of people that are building open source protocols, like essentially the infrastructure layer for the next level of technology.
Sure.
They're doing it for free, they're doing it for the right reasons, and then you see Google, Amazon, Facebook, they take over, they leverage, and they monetize the technology. So is this actually helping the people that are...
Yeah, so I think that's exactly what Andreas earlier mentioned, is that you don't know how some of this technology will be used. And this is why, in my last article that I wrote, which is Blockchain is a Human Problem, not a technical one, is because we have to be conscious about what we're designing and why we're designing it. And when you're in these rooms where there's UN or World Bank or people that are privileged designing platforms for identities of people that are in poorer countries, and without those people in the room, it makes you wonder, what are you doing and why are you doing it, right?
I remember this article that was posted by Forbes the other day about Davos, World Economic Forum, that about 15,000 billionaires flying in with the private jets, having David Attenborough talk about climate change and 1.5 degrees increase. But essentially, you've had a crazy journey yourself, going from refugee to becoming the chief innovation officer at GE and now CEO at OGroup and doing investments yourself. But you're now also, I would say, maybe even part of the establishment yourself.
So interesting you bring that up. I would say quite opposite. My journey to GE was quite an interesting one. I was asked to come in because of a different way of thinking and to see how a platform such as General Electric, that is a global company of
Right.
380,000 people, you could actually use that platform to decentralize some of the systems
Right.
that they've centralized. I had massive resistance
I
internally.
mean, it's
Massive.
I think it's the Forbes 500, 80 largest company in the US. How do you actually move these people from inside your organization to adapt to this change?
Yeah, I think one of the, and if I can take just a bit of time to
Yeah.
explain that, I think it's really important for some of you who work in large organizations here and who are noticing that centralization of power. I actually think that certain things don't need to be decentralized, period. I think we have some systems in the world that work really well. And I go back to what Andreas has said. We don't know what's coming next and what the market will demand.
Right.
But I think within a large organization such as GE, I remember bringing the conversation first time, and I said, we should look at how we interact with our suppliers and vendors. We should see if people in our network, in fact, can make more money through this,
Right.
through the projects. Immediately, I was given a door shut because, one, you talk about blockchain at the time that I talked about it, which was 2013 and 14. They equated it to Bitcoin, which
Right.
then immediately they equated to dark web and porn and illegal weapons, right? Which is fair,
Yeah.
but fiat is used for that as well, right? Even more.
Exactly.
And so the second resistance I've gotten was, hey, we work on quarterly reporting, and I think I listened carefully. Again, Jamie brought it up, right? In terms of investing and people innovating, it's really hard to do that within these organizations when you just have a quarter
Right.
to show your results. And so how do you actually show an Ethereum, right? For example, since I've heard earlier people like Ethereum for some reason.
Some
But
do, some don't.
Yeah. So when you're piloting that and you're trying to see how you can actually create a different business model, you can't do that possibly in 3 to 4 months. No. So it's I was given that pushback immediately. However, though, given my personality, I think, and just right people in my company that supported me in the vision, we created some incredible pilots. But then I was able to bring entrepreneurs from around the world to show how we can actually affect our customers in a positive way.
I mean, if we move forward, and I would say move forward along, let's say 20, 30 years from now, and I recently had the pleasure to interview one of the world's most renowned quantum physicists, and we talked a little bit about quantum mechanics, which was way over my head, but one thing did become clear to me. We're entering this era of industrial revolution, or global science, I would say, Industry 4.0. It's going to eclipse the industrial revolution in total. Blockchain is one of the technologies that is there, but do you think actually that it's going to be around in, let's say, 20 years from now? Quantum computing coming in.
Yeah, I think again there are probably mathematicians and physicists in this room. I would hope, but some of the things we did, and a lot of people dismiss
Right.
companies like GE or large companies. You don't become a large company just starting it in your basement. You've got to have some of the best scientists in the world, and I had privilege in working with some of those.
Right.
And so quantum computing doesn't necessarily disturb some of the things in the blockchain. Sure, it has an ability to completely disrupt the way passwords are done, to unlock data privacy. It does, but I'm not sure that is a complete threat. I think 20, 30 years from now, I don't have a crystal ball and I'm not a futurist, but just given my worldview and 14 different places I've lived and worked, I do think that we might be coming into a phase where you will have platforms like Google and Facebook that you have today, just another type of a platform enabled by a blockchain.
Right,
and it
because
might not be accessible to all.
No, exactly. But that's actually
Right?
what I'm trying to pinpoint here. Is like we're going to close up about quantum and actually move back to the past a little bit. But I mean, the impact for potentially personalized healthcare is one, of course. There's so many things that actually, so I'm just figuring out, people that are spending their resource and time on these protocols right now, maybe they should actually, think about other things as well. But that's kind of course, an impossible question to answer. If I look back, maybe if I dive back a little bit to 2011, you got that white paper. And one of the things that you mentioned in our prep call, which kind of made me a little bit curious, was you were part of the first Satoshi Roundtable.
Yeah.
I mean, what was said there?
It's always a curious thing. I remember being invited to it, and I was invited because I ran a political election in Mali in West Africa, and when I was very young, and try to see how you can uplift 90% of the population in these countries that don't get a chance to vote, because these elections are highly rigged, as we've seen with Cambridge Analytica and other things. Cambridge Analytica, by the way, for those of you in the room that don't know, existed way before the Times, and it started in 1980s as a research project, right? And so elections around the world have been rigged for many years, and I think we're sitting in a country that doesn't necessarily have the transparency of such things.
Okay.
So you're having this interesting dynamic right now, right? Of Satoshi being anonymous, but yet not really. But really.
What do you mean not really? I mean, he's completely anonymous, isn't he?
I think it's a she, by the way.
Okay. Well, perfect point.
Just saying.
Okay. So where? So who is she then? Okay. Well.
Might be in the room here somewhere. I don't know, or on a stage. But so I think.
Okay. I think we just had a massive revelation here. Okay. Cool.
Just joking, but I think on the first roundtable, what I was absolutely honored with and fascinated is that I was surrounded by people who had such passion for a different world, for a world that, yes, earlier you heard ICOs, and what ICOs enabled is just this ideological concept, just like crowdfunding, right? That anybody in the world can invest in any entrepreneur in the world.
It's essentially opening up.
How fucking amazing is that? Yeah. So you have this. Just really talking about it gives me chills, because you can have, a woman in Africa who knits sweaters, or a woman in a village in Bulgaria who does the same, and is funded by a Silicon Valley woman, who's a house mom that is a wife of a billionaire, right? I mean, incredible.
Right.
And then you've got some idiots who've taken that completely in a different place and exploited it because of greed. And this is exactly why, Ton, I go back in my article of blockchain is a human problem, not a technical one. Technology is there. We can do, Bitcoin works. If anybody tries to tell you that it doesn't, it works. Sure, it has fees and it has issues, right, but it works. Other currencies work. I think what doesn't work is the ethical problem we have within, and the greed that we have within that drives a lot of this.
Right, but how is this something? I mean, this is a question we might be able to answer. But how do you stop this? Because every time we see this incredible technology advance and change, and then people start using it for good, and then all of a sudden it's leveraged for the worst. Actually, I found it really crazy and ridiculous to see that a lot of people that had this all of a sudden had power and had money started to buy crazy things and actually closed up instead of opening up. It's also inherent in humankind, no?
Tell me a little bit more about that. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, the obvious thing, of course, if you go to, let's say, an average crypto conference, it's held in Bali somewhere in Mykonos, overlooking the island of Eros, filled with Lamborghinis and people spending like crazy. And these are the same people that have been outside of the system for 10 to 20 years and now effectively are becoming, I would say, similar to people in power and in play.
There is a concept, and it is strange because my name is Maja, but the concept is actually M-A-Y-A, which is, if you dig it up, it's from a European immigrant in, I think, 1700s into the U.S. who then ended up constructing most of the museums and designs in the U.S. I think Lowe's or something like that is his last name. He perfected this philosophy, which is actually very much used in our technology, in our society today, which is a familiarity with innovation, right? So to your point, what I mean by that is you see a lot of people today, new minds coming on board and saying, I see a perfect system, everything peer-to-peer, I make money, you make money, all these people make money, but reality, it's not the case, right? No. They haven't learned from the old system, and they think that old system doesn't matter. But I think our mind, we really we sometimes pick and choose what we want to know, and where we want to put our efforts to. And so what comes between true innovation, right, is sometimes we can't innovate too much, because usually human beings won't take it, because people like familiarity.
You have to ease them into it.
That's right. And on the other side, you have then the human is split with this greed to say, wait, but this is my chance to create the best protocol out there, right? Andreas asked earlier, what's your favorite blockchain, right? And people yelled different things. In reality, I'd say out of let's say 50 protocols out there, 40 of them can collaborate and make something, actually sit down, do real work, right? Instead of say, my thing is better than yours. And here's why, because of 5 different lines of code. That's just ego, and that's just lack of experience. And this is where I get frustrated.
I mean, essentially, it's about building inclusive, collaborative communities, right? And work together. It's a global issue. We're in this together, right? But I mean, one of the things I talked to a couple of bankers about this, and they were not really happy me mentioning. But what would then a future without money be? Potentially part of the solution if greed is the actual problem.
No, unless you go to Burning Man. How many of you have been to Burning Man?
Let's have a quick check.
Well, a couple of hands, Okay. Yeah. So, that's not a problem there, right? But no. I think, look, fiat is going to exist for a long time. We just had a conversation with the 3rd largest company that prints money for everybody in the world. And they're investing in digital assets, for sure. They see the crypto side coming on. They see the digital exchange coming on. They see people kind of creating these networks of value. I just don't think the fiat money is going anytime soon. Not in my lifetime, I think, but I might be wrong. I could be shooting myself in the foot by predicting that. But I think it will exist side by side with a lot of different things.
I mean,
I think by the way, I think machines, that's a different thing. Again, IoT, and one of the pilots that we did at GE, I built a wallet on a machine that runs predictive analytics on itself. And when the machine runs predictive analytics, it's able to predict which part of the body will go broke in a certain amount of time. And so I built a token wallet to then say, okay, if your arm is going to go broke within a month, you generate a smart contract, order a part on your own through a supplier, right? It gets delivered.
Which sounds pretty simple, but it implicates.
But actually, no. Within a smart factory, it's a concept called smart factories. That actually works without any money, any fiat, right? It works on its own money, does have a value attached to it.
There's still a value exchange, of course.
Absolutely. But it's done through a token, it's done digitally.
Well, is that something that you're interested about? Let's see, I mean, we're seeing still a lot of traditional industries being disrupted at the moment, especially right now within logistics and transport. You see machine-to-machine interaction, cars maybe not only driving themselves, but also paying for themselves. Is this something that you're particularly excited about right now?
I am and I'm not. I'm scared. I'm in privacy space, and when you think about having a privacy coin, and you already have drones, right, that communicate to each other, and particularly U.S., China, and Israel have created a very specific drones that could target very specific people. It is very scary. You attach a privacy token to that, we're screwed, because you can end up having crowd-funded assassinations through privacy coins, which is a really scary thought. And if we don't figure out how to carve out these systems ethically, you know who will, is AI. And we think he won't, but it will, given what I've seen at GE, and again, GE has been doing AI for 20 years before it became a sexy word, right? These things are really, really scary.
I mean, you're tapping into, I would say, incredibly tough and moral problem, because one of the things that you can say in Europe are always, I would say, fast movers in terms of we do GDPR, we want to be compliant, we want to make sure there's good human rights. On the other hand, we're also not really fast in terms of development. So let's say if we not develop these technologies that potentially disrupt the way we live today and create AI and use autonomous drones, let's say maybe China will, or maybe the US will. So what do we do there? People are going to develop if there's a possibility to develop, right?
No, I ask for universities, politicians, entrepreneurs. I think VCs hold a lot of power. I actually had a very strong debate in one of our chats. Some of the guys know in here, with a couple of VCs who invested in things that were borderline dangerous. And I literally looked at these guys, and they're quite known guys, and I said, what the you're doing? Because it is your responsibility in what you're investing in. So if you're investing for a multiple of 10, I don't give a shit, because you just created a line of entrepreneurs who are all about this, as you said, efficiency, competition, and greed, versus creating a better society. You can still make money, by the way. You're still making money.